This is High School Not So Much a Musical, a podcast that takes you on a ride through the peaks and valleys of a high school journey. Here are your presenters, Nitin Jaladanki and Ayush Agarwal.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of High School Not So Much Musical. Today we are joined by Kunaal Kapila, who is a senior at a Michigan high school, and he is a youth entrepreneur who is a co-founder at Comet Drones. So Kunaal, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're located, how's school going? I know you're seniors, so if you want to talk a little bit about your college apps, where you're planning on applying to, what you're trying to major in, etc., that'd be great.
Yeah, totally. So I go to Northville High School, which is, as Ayush stated, a high school in Michigan. And I just started my senior year, which has been pretty nice, honestly, compared to junior year. The only real stressor was college apps, which I just finished like the ED and EA round. I applied to like most schools that like I planned on applying to like a few years ago, which was UPenn, Michigan, and then other like in-state safety schools. And then I'm planning on applying to more schools in the RD round. But yeah.
Okay, so you just talked about UPenn, and I'm a big fan of UPenn as well, Kunaal. So could you talk to us a little bit about how you decided to, could you discuss a little bit about your major and what the specific majors that you picked within your schools were? Because there's obviously a lot of different majors, like there's just general business, but then you also probably did a minor in something. So before we get to the actual part about Comet, could you just talk a little bit about your college applications, how they went, the whole process of it and stuff like that? Because we have had like a college counselor talk about how to write essays and everything like that. So if we could have your experience on it, since you just finished the EDEA round, that would be great.
Yeah, totally. So I'll just start out with like choosing schools first. So most of my schools I plan on applying to like since like 7th or 8th grade. Like I've had a lot of these schools at my mind for many years now. Only like a couple of them I found to be like analogous to like what I want to do in the past like year or a couple months or so. But my major specifically, I'm doing business with a side concentration in sustainability. So at Michigan, I feel like they have the most close thing to what I'm doing in their Herb Institute, which is sort of just a business school, Ross Business School and sustainability dual degree, where you again pursue the crossroads between sustainability and business. UPenn, I sort of have, it's another one of those schools I've had in my mind for a long time. I'm sure many people kind of can relate to that. It's like a lot of people's dream schools. For my major there, I don't recall exactly what it was, but it was the one that concentrated in finance. I think my future, what it holds for me is something in possibly investment banking or private equity. I know a lot of these big banks now have like sustainability niches in their banks. So possibly pursuing something in that department. But yeah.
Okay, perfect. So now that we kind of covered your college applications and where you want to go, could you talk? So Kunaal and I were both co-founders of Comet, and there's two other people we started it with. So Kunaal, could you talk to us a little bit about Quarter Zero, how you thought that, describe what Quarter Zero is for the listeners, because they obviously don't know, how the process was, and how we initiated our first pivot from the first idea that we had was like the stock market thing to our final idea, which was Comet.
Yeah, totally. So initially not Comet Drones, Quarter Zero, we found as a program similar to ones that like LaunchX or some like these incubator programs. And I think Nitin and a couple other people and I were like randomly selected or something as part of a team, or we chose each other. I totally don't remember that part. But we had like multiple ideation sessions in like the very early stages of it, where we came up with like a financial news application that tried to make finance more approachable or easier to consume by younger audiences or audiences that are not so like attached to the finance world. So after we tried to like vet that out for like a little bit, we realized that the idea was, in a market that was way too saturated and way too difficult to like hit because there are websites like Investopedia, apps like Robinhood, and other platforms that already hit this market very well. So we realized that we needed to get something different. So this was sort of like our low point in quarter zero because we really didn't know what to do. But we contacted the main person, the counselor. His name I forgot, but I'm pretty sure Nitin will remember it. But we did like ideation sessions for like an hour or so, just purely just throwing out ideas, like relentlessly just throwing out ideas. Anything that was at the top of our heads, we would just throw out there, no matter its obscurity. So with that, we came up with Comet Drones. We didn't name it Comet Drones at the time, but we thought of a platform that could educate people, specifically younger people, on the importance of drones in the STEM market.
So originally you had this news idea and you said that it was too saturated, so you were going to pivot to a new idea. So then you created Comet Drones. Obviously that wasn't the name at the time, but how did you know that this final idea was going to be possible to execute?
Yeah, totally. So it was Josh. His name I remember is Josh. So we talked to him a lot, and he sort of gave us that little push in this idea that like, okay, I think this idea is the best out of this litany of ideas you just threw out to me. And with that, we kind of went on like a little research journey, looking at like if other companies hit this market, if there were already existing competitors in this field. And we found very little of those hitting this exact like target market that we really wanted to touch on. And on top of that, we contacted a couple of industry professionals, one of them being in the military and the other hosting a drone website blog of sorts. And they also sort of confirmed our idea being valid or usable in this field. And with that, we sort of, we're like, okay, this works. We know it works. And we sort of did that big push on it.
Something you said that I found interesting was the extent to which you all did the market research in order to determine what competitors you already had existing in this field. Because on any sort of entrepreneurial show like Shark Tank, they always want you to make sure that you're analyzing the market. And one of the previous entrepreneurs we spoke to, who founded Produce Locator, she also talked about the importance of market research to the point where you can't do enough of it, because it's so important to know what the market in which you are targeting to launch your product and looks like. So can you talk a little bit more about how you, Nitin, and everyone else approached that research, and how you all looked at the current companies in the drone field and how they specifically weren't targeting to the youth?
Yeah, for sure. So I agree with that. Like market research, you can never do enough of it, because it sort of shows where you are in what you're doing. So how we went about it, we had like sort of our tagline or sorts, or a mission statement, or a thesis, I would say, of what Comet Drones was going to be, and we kind of just searched around using that thesis. So we found multiple websites that of course had drone education, like that has to exist, but we noticed that, okay, this is for a completely different like market, like military stuff, or regulation stuff, or government-based stuff, and then the STEM education stuff we found again did not encapsulate drones within it. It was more like just other STEM related based things, but we found one like confirming factor in our market research, which was the MSU drone education thing. So I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was sort of a youth education STEM program with drones at Michigan State University. And we noticed that, it was doing well, it existed, but it didn't really like hit the exact like specific niche that we were going for. And with that, we kind of progressed with it. But yeah, with market research, you just have, what we did, we just looked up everything like, okay, drone education, STEM education, again, the thesis, and we searched around, all the links, all the sublinks, everything that existed, all the images, anything that we could come by that could either confirm or, deny our thesis, or and help us progress and generate more ideas.
So the next question that I had was like fast tracking a little bit. When we did pitch our idea, we did receive venture capitalist funding from it, from the 1517 fund. So Kunaal, could you tell me a little about what you think helped Comet stand out among all the other people that were pitching? Because quarter zero had like a group of, I believe, 50 students from across the world. And within those 50 students, there were around 6 or 7 companies, startups in total. And it ranged from having sustainable clothes. There was one about getting sustainable food. There's a lot of different ideas that came across. But what do you think helped Comet stand out the most and help to secure the funding? And if you could talk a little bit about the funding that we received and everything like that, that would be great.
Yeah, totally. So I think what stuck us out of the pack was the uniqueness that was Comet Drones. Like when we pitched it, you could see the investors' faces, like you could see a glow. A couple of them were very, very surprised and very, very interested with the thesis and the topic in general. And I think the conviction of which we presented Comet Drones also benefited us in that sense. We presented it in a way that made it look very, very unique, and it is very unique. What we presented is not super existent in the market right now, and I think that's what really, really pushed the investors and the judges to favor us over other companies. And there was a second part of your question. What was that again?
Yeah. So the second part of my question was, how do you think that what do you think helped us stand out the most, like more specifically, because all the other people also had really interesting ideas. And so what I'm basically asking is, what do you think was within our presentation or within the way that we were answering our questions that helped us stand out? And with the money that we did get, could you talk a little bit about what we could use it for, what we did use it for, everything like that?
Yeah, totally. So I think we kind of took a step ahead compared to everyone else by contacting industry professionals. The market research we did was very, very in-depth and to the point. The way of which we presented it, was very unique. And our website and everything culminated, the Instagram account, all the sort of social media outreach we did sort of culminated into one like bigger backing into a very, very unique idea. And I think that's what really pushed the investors over hedge for us. And with the money we received from the 15-17 fund, what we could do with it, again, with Comet Drones, there's a lot of sourcing stuff that has to go along, the backlines. It could go into there. What we did do with it, we did it to maintain our website and the domain costs. And I think we could do some advertising things with it. There are multiple things you could do with that, the investing money. But yeah, the main thing that really pushed the investors over hedge with us, I think, was the amount of stuff and things we got, to really push this unique idea. I think validate it is a good word. We got all the market research, we got all the the industry professionals, and we sort of vetted it to a point that it was very, very, very much so legitimized, comparatively speaking, especially.
So you said that your presentation was unique in a certain way. And I know right now Nitin is on a Shark Tank binge. And in like marketing, your pitch or your presentation is about like 90% of trying to get investors intrigued. So how do you think your personal skills affected the outcome of like your various interviews? And do you think you grew in personal terms such as social awareness, empathy, and emotional intelligence while working on this project? And you can answer this question, and so can Nitin, because Nitin worked along with you.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll tackle the second part of your question first. So social awareness, empathy, all those kind of things. I learned so much when it came to Comet Drones, just by essence of working in a team in a competitive environment, especially from people you have never seen or ever talked to before. You had to learn, you had to learn their ways, the ways that they learn, everything. And there are a couple like anecdotes I have of that. So when we were working on Comet Drones, and before that, we had like a bunch of feedback loops just to like gauge like where we were, and I thought those are very, very helpful. Seeing what everyone thought of each other's work and what we could improve on in a very calm and professional way that was made for each other's learning. I learned a lot about that, and I still use feedback loops today in the stuff that I manage and the things that I do, because I think that they're just so helpful in learning about people in your team and growing as a collective whole.
So adding on to Kunaal, more about like the personal skills that we used when it came to like the interviews and growing as people within it. In the end, we were just a group of 4 random high schoolers that as Kunaal said, we've never met each other. We barely know anything about each other. but we all had the common goal of helping this business idea succeed. We all knew that we had this entrepreneurial spirit within us, and we all knew that we wanted to take this idea to fruition. What the other teams did that we took even further, and the other teams that didn't do, was that we truly wanted to act as if this wasn't an incubator. The end goal wasn't to pitch to VCs, but the end goal was to actually have our product come to the total market, and actually have our product on the shelves wherever hobby shops or online or whatever you see. So the personal skills that we had to really use was this idea of reaching out to whoever we needed to without the shame of getting no's, without getting yeses. We just need to get where we need, and it doesn't matter how hard we have to work for it. So one of the things that we did was, when we wanted to validate our idea, we knew that there was a need for it. But who will listen to you more? A group of 15-year-olds who are from random places, or a person who has already established themselves within the drone industry? Which is why we reached out to Patrick Egan. So he was the one that Kunaal was talking about, who worked in the military and such. So when we talked to Patrick Egan, we were on a phone interview with him. And the way that we phrased it was, could you talk about some of the problems? And I'm quoting what he said. He says, drones are super difficult for teens to understand, which acts as a barrier to get into the growing drone industry. So I identified two key components. The first was that it's difficult for teens to get into, and second, it's a growing industry which needs more people to keep competitive, right? And then what we asked him next was, what helps us stand out? So we talked about how it had an affordable price point, creation of a course, and it was a unique approach. So in terms of personal skills, the way that you need to approach a business for any young entrepreneur listening out there, you need to have that idea of people are going to reject you flat out, and that you cannot take that to heart, because you're nobody when you're starting out your business. You're just another person who's trying to make the dream come true of becoming an entrepreneur. So you need to have that idea of failure is just a part of a journey to success. And even success is not the end destination. It's sort of like a milestone for you to reach, because success is not, there's no definition of success, and you will only become the definition of success because you need to make yourself the definition of a success. So make sure you have those personal skills of always pushing yourself to never take failure to heart and to keep working on it.
Yeah, I totally agree. The most was to not be scared when approaching other people, and approaching, people, industry professionals per se. If we had stayed, afraid and feared rejection, we would have never gotten their testimonies on our idea. We would have never gotten their opinions. And frankly, I don't even know if Comet Drones would have succeeded in that pitch deck.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially when you're just starting off and you're nobody, if you don't have the courage to go out and get rejected, contact 100 people and only have one response, then there's no way you're going to succeed, because you need to build those initial partnerships. You need to build that additional foundation, you need to build that fundamental foundation and get yourself out there before you're able to actually succeed with your startup, which is why I'm pretty sure there's some statistics 80% of startups fail or whatever. What I want to ask is, when you have the concept of failing, then retrying, failing and retrying, obviously that process can take a long time. So I'm sure you all had some initial failures, and through those failures you were able to come back up and ultimately succeed. So can you all talk a little bit about, number one, how long did this whole startup process take? Obviously you all are still a startup, but establishing those those fundamental websites, marketing, your business plan, etc. How long did that stuff take? And also, how long did it take for you to become legitimately known, at least a little bit, in the real world through the partnerships you were able to create with the man who was in the military and who then went on to found his own drone company, etc.?
Yeah, totally. So the startup process, I think it's a never-ending thing. But gaining the fundamental basis of a startup for us, I would say, took I think a couple months with non-stop work during the week. When it came to creating the website, creating the Instagram account, working out the multiple documents, and just thinking of various variables. It took a long while, to say the least. And getting known in the real world. When it came to approaching those industry professionals, I think we got written about a couple times by Patrick Egan, and on Drone Life, by someone. The amount of time it took to get that I think it was in that beginning phase of the startup. That just came from communicating and not fearing rejection.
So just if I can add on to that, the problem with an incubator is that you have very little time to kind of come up with your idea. So the incubator started in the middle of June and went till like the end of July. And when we first started with the incubator, we were just thinking of problems. And when we were thinking of those problems, the first thing that we had to do, if I can go a little bit into the ideation itself, we would just list out problems for 30 seconds and not 30 seconds, for a minute. And there was no point in saying no. We would say yes and. So somebody would give out a problem that they had and we would say yes and. Because the thing is that when you start listing out the problems and you're not directly commenting on them first, there's a way to draw distinctions between them. And that's how you actually come up with a viable idea. Because if you want to go out and say, I want to fix global warming, that's the common example that I use. I want to fix global warming and climate change. You can't fix that with just one idea. So if you keep going with yes and, yes and, yes and, you eventually get to a very simple idea that you can actually execute on. So Kunaal can also vouch for me on this, but when we were doing our ideation session, when we knew that we had to pivot because the stock market and the investing app didn't work, we started with the main idea of drones are difficult to use and nobody has an idea for how drones work. And then the other person we were working with, they said yes, and I tried building a drone once. I didn't know how to build it. I didn't know how to code it, and I struggled for months. And once it keeps going on like that, the startup the process can take months. But for us, we were pushed on into fixing everything into 1.5 months, which was something that we were really grateful for, because procrastination is always there, because you can always keep telling yourself, I'm going to do this later. I'm going to do this later. But within that 1.5 months, we created a YouTube channel. We put out like 7 or 8 videos, which got hundreds of views. We got published in a few drone articles. We conducted interviews. So having that work ethic of getting everything done within a small period of time helps you realize exactly what you need to work on. So Kunaal, if anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think you hit that totally well. We were thrown into like a little bit of a wrench because we had to do it in a much quicker time scan, especially because we pivoted off that stock idea a little later compared to the other people who pivoted. So we had to work especially hard during those weeks, hours wise. And with all that came getting published, working on the Instagram account, working on the website, and fleshing out all those fundamental things that make a startup a startup.
So in quarter 0, you said that you were paired with 4, or I don't know how many people it was, but it was basically you were in a team with people from all across like the nation, and you never really knew them, well, except for Nitin now. But do you think being in a team helped you like create the startup, and were you more efficient with it, or was it like sort of like bad for you because like you never knew these people and you guys maybe weren't on the same census?
I think being in a team was probably the best thing to happen, because with a team comes, various perspectives from their backgrounds and various ideas and various ways of working that I would have never thought of beforehand. And if it were a solo thing, I would have never been able to come up with the thesis of Comet drones. And since it was in a team, we were all able to kind of critique the thesis and build it into something that was more workable. But yeah, being in a team was the best thing to happen. In the beginning, it being a team was a little complicated. Of course, that is to come, especially if you don't know them, you've never seen them before. You don't know how they work, you don't know their personality type. So it was a little bit difficult in the beginning. But with the feedback loops and just from the essence of just working together for a long period of time, it grew into something that was, more than a team, and personal friendships and personal relationships that sort of, eclipse and pass the essence of work and more into personal relationships. But yeah, it being a team was definitely helpful, and it was sort of the crux of the idea in general.
So on one side, you have your business team, the people you're working with, pretty much every day to help make your business a success. But on the other side, you have your market, your consumers. And obviously for your business team, I'm not sure how it worked in your incubator, if you were able to choose it or not, but in the real world, like unless you are starting your own company, you kind of have to learn to work with different people, because if you join a company, you don't get to control who you're working with at the company. You're essentially assigned a team. You have to figure out how to work with them, or you're off the team. So in the same way, you kind of have to learn to work with multiple different people, whether it be on your team or also with your consumers. You don't really get to choose who your consumers are going to be. But what you can do is you can kind of choose an overall general target market on who you're planning to market to, who you're planning to reach out to, who you're planning to specifically target in terms of those people are going to end up being the majority of people who buy your product. So if you could talk a little bit about how Comet Drones specifically figured out your guys' target market, which ended up being like teens, I think that would be very interesting.
Okay, yeah. So we kind of figured out our target market from the beginning. Like when we first ideated of and a STEM education platform that sort of rode off the back end of drones. So when we were thinking about it, I'm pretty sure the person who pitched it, who threw that idea out, was sort of hinting at the fact that it's especially difficult for people around his age group, because in our current education market, in our current education space, there are STEM classes, but none of them sort of look at drones. They're sort of more computer oriented or science oriented, but they don't really look at drones as the medium for that. So with that idea, we sort of already knew that, okay, what we're going to be tackling here is a target market of people our age. And of course, at that time, and still then, we are teenagers, we're in high school, and we sort of knew that, okay, this age group was going to be our target market. With some more time, we sort of realized that, okay, we can make easier videos, we can make easier course lessons, we can make more difficult ones. So then came the idea that, okay, we can make a high school based courses, or elementary based courses, and then maybe in the future we can do like more community college based courses that can sort of breach that higher end market, more aged up market. But yeah, generally when we were first thinking about it, that's when our target market came to mind. We really did not need to do more fleshing out for that. I will speak generally though, as I've spearheaded many other things. The way you can find out your target market is by surveying. We also did surveying, but we already knew, okay, this is what our target market would be. But say like you're wondering if teenagers is your target market group. You'll send out a survey to a bunch of teenagers. If you're a teenager, your friends, your friends' friends, so they're not biased. If they'd like this product, we sort of did that. I texted a bunch of my friends, if our thesis would be viable for them, and most of them said yes. So with that sort of validation and with that sort of data, you can confirm or deny if this target market is yours or not.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of High School Not So Much a Musical. If you liked our conversation with Kunaal, you're in luck. You just listened to part 1 of our 2-part conversation with Kunaal and I. In every business, there are always going to be the bad parts. So for an interesting story over a legal intellectual property battle with the other co-founders and how exactly we addressed it, tune in next Friday for part 2. Thank you for listening and see you next time. That's our show for today. Now roll the credits. High School Not So Much a Musical is hosted by Ayush Agarwal, Nitin Jaladanki, and Rishi Sinha. Narration by Samhit Padala. Music from Louis Luang Relaxation Cafe, Tune Pocket, and Infraction. If you like the show, please recommend it to your friends and family. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.